You're camping with your friends in the woods. Maybe it's one of their birthday parties. You're all laughing and having a good time. Some of you are eating cake, others are arriving with presents, others are down by the dock having a good time in the boat. Then you hear a rustling in the bushes. You get suspicious, but you still carry on and have a good time. Then suddenly, a machete pierces through your friend's chest, and you see a massive abomination behind him. Jason Vor... Wait. Hang on. I'm sorry. I started reading ahead of my script again. Let's just start from the top. Then suddenly, a machete pierces through your friend's chest, and you see a massive abomination behind him, a big, angry bear. Your friend's stuffing is ripped for them. You run to the dock to get in the boat, but it's not working. Quick, to the car, but it's been tampered with and won't start. You run to the phone, but it won't connect. Then all at once, you feel a sharp pain in your side, and it's lights out. Welcome to The Forgotten Franchise, the show where we look at gaming oddities, franchises, or anything else forgotten in the gaming world. Today we're going to be looking at a game that I'm honestly shocked even exists, 2010's Naughty Bear. For those of you who don't know anything about Naughty Bear, and if my fanfiction from earlier didn't make it clear, think of Naughty Bear as the Friday the 13th game, but with teddy bears. Both games have very similar parts, such as stalking prey, messing with cars and boats, and preventing prey from escaping, and getting really creative in kills. So why exactly are you murdering other adorable teddy bears in this game? Well, obviously because you didn't get invited to a birthday party, and when you came with a gift anyway, you got laughed at. A perfectly valid reason to start a killing spree. The game is composed of several episodes, with each episode having several chapters that need to be completed in order to pass the episode. Most of these chapters drop players in a really small sandbox where they'll be given a checklist of items to complete. Sometimes these items are things as simple as killing all the bears in a given area, or they can have much more complex challenges associated with them, such as killing bears without throwing punches or using weapons. Naughty Bear didn't get great reviews critically. Okay, yeah, I mean, they're actually pretty bad, but honestly, I kinda disagree with critics here. The game is a lot of fun to play and gives you really a ton of options to take out other teddy bears. You have blunt objects, knives, guns, and traps, but can also block doors to try to trap teddy bears, break windows, and hide in cabinets to try to scare bears. Which leads us to one of the biggest mechanics of this game. Naughty Bear has the ability to scare other bears for points. You can score higher points by catching bears in a trap and scaring them, or scaring them so much that they decide to off themselves. But the bears will not go quietly. They'll fight back, try to call for help, or try to escape by either boat or car. And if a bear successfully gets in a car, boards a boat, or starts talking to help on the phone, you'll have a limited time to intercept them before either they get away or help arrives. You can of course beat bears to a pulp with your fists or a variety of other weapons, but there are ways to use the environment to help you murder these teddy bears. The game refers to these as contextual kills and can be performed anytime a bear is standing next to something that could be harmful to them. Before each level, you can select an outfit that'll give Naughty Bear certain upgrades such as strength or speed. These actually are a big help and make more complicated levels and challenges considerably easier. Plus, they kind of look cool and they're fun to collect. But unfortunately, the game does have rather clunky controls, and at times an absolutely abysmal camera, which makes it hard to be super stealthy when maneuvering around. But that's really it in terms of game mechanics. Naughty Bear isn't exactly a deep game, and the levels do get repetitive after a while as the game simply stops being able to surprise you. The plot does have a few things to happen to try to spice up the gameplay, such as a mayor running for election with the promise to kill Naughty Bear, but this doesn't really change the gameplay all that much besides introducing a few different enemy types. Honestly though, Naughty Bear was never going to be one of those games to win a ton of awards or be jam-packed with amazing plot beats. It's one of those games that you simply turn off your brain and play for an hour or two with music playing in the background and try to have a good time. I'd definitely say that's a bit of a cult classic as well. I think a big part of that is the overall cute aesthetic that the game goes for. I mean, just look at the main menu here. It looks like the DVD menu to a kid's show gone wrong. And the same feeling carries over to the gameplay, with a narrator that talks in a very encouraging and happy voice, and with environments that are very bright and vibrant as well, and with bears that are also very bright and very vibrant and very cute. So who is the studio behind this bedtime story gone rogue? Well, it's a developer with a rather long history, Artificial Mind and Movement. Before Naughty Bear, Artificial Mind and Movement made a ton of games, mostly licensed titles, and some of which I played a ton of growing up, such as Ed, Edd n Eddy, The Misadventures, Teen Titans, and Iron Man. Hey, I didn't say they were all good, I just said that I played them growing up. So, the studio has had a long and pretty successful history. But what have they done since then? Well, after the release of Naughty Bear and a mini-golf game, they changed their name to Behavior Interactive. As Behavior Interactive, they continued to make mostly licensed games, until in 2016 when they made an absolute hit, Dead by Daylight. Looking at Dead by Daylight after knowing that the team behind it made Naughty Bear, this makes a ton of sense. A lot of the mechanics from Dead by Daylight are present in Naughty Bear, such as traps, hiding, and accomplishing objectives to try to escape. But what has happened in the Naughty Bear franchise since the release of Naughty Bear in 2010? Well, the game has received 3 DLC episodes, all telling their own self-contained and brief stories, but that's it, right? I mean, the game was killed by critics and probably didn't sell very well, so no sequel, right? Episode over. Well, that's what I originally thought, but when I looked at the Wikipedia page for Naughty Bear, I discovered that there was a sequel that completely flew under my radar entirely. 2012's Naughty Bear, Panic in Paradise. The big reason why this flew under my radar was that it was a digital-only release. And I know what you're thinking, but Big Green, lots of games are download-only. And you would be right, but you gotta remember that the original game came out in 2010 and the sequel in 2012. While games were absolutely available to download digitally, they still were mostly being purchased physically, so it's no surprise that a poorly marketed game to a game that was poorly received by critics managed to fly under my radar. And if you look at the YouTube comments for this game's reveal trailer, I'm clearly not the only one that this has happened to. But how does Panic in Paradise fare as its own title? Well, after I paid a whopping $15 to download it, I was utterly flabbergasted at just how much of a visual downgrade this is over the original game. Here's footage from Naughty Bear 2010, then here's footage from Panic in Paradise. An absolute massive downgrade, and on some level, I understand it. It's a much smaller game that released on Xbox Live Arcade, so it's not necessarily going to have the best visuals. But this would be totally understandable if it ran well, and oh boy, Panic in Paradise does not do that. The game would stutter and have frame rate issues constantly. When you're in an enclosed space, the game does run fine, but the moment you go outside and there's more than like 5 objects on the screen, the game absolutely freaks out. How is this at all acceptable? I mean, the 360 and PS3 had games like Battlefield 3 and Crysis 2 running on them, so I'm just blown away that this was able to happen on a console that's so much more powerful than the game is giving it credit for. Now, let's just ignore the visuals. How does Panic in Paradise compare to the original game from strictly a gameplay perspective? Well, it's kind of a mixed bag in my opinion. The game both adds some things that are good and takes away things from the original that I also thought were good and should have been included. For example, you now have a wide variety of customization options for Naughty Bear. You can add things like masks, outfits, and hats. These also give you a variety of upgrades so that they're not purely cosmetic. They're also a nice inclusion over the original game, where the customization options were non-existent outside of a few extra costumes that Naughty Bear could use. Panic in Paradise also came with a ton of DLC on its own. I mean, just look at all of this stuff. Most of it is outfits from other horror franchises. While these are cool, I definitely wouldn't consider these things must-haves, but you could definitely spend a considerable amount of money here if you wanted to. There are a few mechanics that improve Panic in Paradise over the original game. For example, you can now pick up other bears and move them to hidden locations around the map to kill them without other bears seeing. You also now have the ability to steal their costumes or uniforms to blend in with other bears. The minimap has also received a nice overhaul, now with visual cones to tell you which direction the bears are looking. This is a nice improvement over the original game as it's now much easier to sneak around bears at close quarters. The context kills in my opinion are also more creative than they were in the original game. The game is also a lot more open now, and this makes sneaking around kind of impossible, but this does vastly improve the camera, as it's now much easier to see around your environment. Unfortunately, things like barricading doors are entirely gone, but these didn't prove to be a huge mechanic in the original game, so I can see why they didn't feel the need to include it. Like the first game, there will be, of course, different objectives that you have to complete each time you go into a level. But now these objectives are much more centered around assassinating a certain teddy bear. This game seems to borrow a lot of influence from franchises like Hitman, as you have a certain target you have to assassinate, and sometimes even a specific way as to how you have to assassinate them. A lot of the optional side quests are also a lot more dumbed down than they were in the original, taking away quite a bit of the replayability that the original game had. Also, maybe it didn't happen that much on my playthroughs, but it really feels like the other bears don't have much of an interest in escaping or calling for help like they did in the original. They still have all these options available to them, but seem to be much more keen on beating up Naughty Bear instead of escaping. But honestly, I kinda like this, as it makes the game much more difficult and the bears a lot less helpless. The game's sort of cutesy children's DVD aesthetic that I mentioned earlier is also entirely gone. Now the game has a much more rugged, lost on a deserted island tone. This was a major misstep in my opinion, as I think it added a ton to the creepiness factor that the original game had. The plot is also super generic, but to sum it up, now the bears from your hometown have decided to go on vacation without Naughty Bear, and Naughty Bear is mad, so here he goes killing again. Overall, I'd still very much recommend the original over the sequel, but if there was ever a third Naughty Bear game, which there almost certainly will not be, I'd like to see a blend of the original and the sequel, only combining the best of each. Now, in 2020, all we are left with is a very brief blip in the history of gaming that was the Naughty Bear franchise. Whether you love these games or hated them, you do still have to admit that they were certainly very, very unique. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Forgotten Franchise. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and share this video with your friends. But most importantly, take care, stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.